the other two.
Okay.
And then under policy A1 428, that should actually read employee use of social media and not student.
Okay. Do I have a second to the amended agenda motion?
Seconded.
By Rich. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. On this consent agenda this evening, we have the check wire transfer disbursement summary, approval of the school board minutes from April 11th and April 25th, donations, an AED from the Mdewakanton Sioux for the Dam Patch Stadium, military flags to the middle schools from Nancy Peterson, CEO of Display Sales, $500 from Loretta Spurley, and Wells Fargo Community Support to Twin Oaks, $100 from Tom Dolger and Darla Rodell through residential mortgage for Twin Cities, for Twin Oaks, and resignations and terminations and non-renewals as listed. Also, we have our Minnesota High School League membership for 2011-2012. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
By Tom. Second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. And we have Laker Pride.
We invite Alex Zakowski to come down, please. Or come over. Welcome. Alex is our, let's come over here and get ourselves here. Alex is our Athena Award winner, and is the mic on? Turn it around so we can see it. Okay. For 2011, we're very proud of her. She is going to Bemidji State on a hockey scholarship. She looked at other colleges and decided to stay right here. Yeah. How long have you had this dream to be an Athena Award winner?
Probably since middle school.
Since middle school. And you know what's really interesting? She has 2 half sisters, and they're both.
They both on it as well.
That is quite a family accomplishment, wouldn't you say? We're very proud of you and your accomplishments. What are your next dreams?
Probably just to go to Bemidji and do well there. See where I go from there.
Good. Congratulations. We're very proud of you, and we wish you the best of luck as you move toward these next new adventures. So one of these gets on in our high school, and one she gets to keep home. Are there 2 others like this at home?
Yeah. Well, they just have their flag day. They don't have the cool frame.
There you go. Well, I think it would be a good time. You have that over.
Sue Ann,
Yes.
I think you might not have told everybody. I mean, many folks know what the Athena Award recognizes, but can you let everybody know specifically what it is?
Well, it's basically based on, it's like athletics and academics mostly. And I think you have to be part of the arts too as well.
Yeah.
It's most outstanding female.
It's pretty special. Yeah, it's pretty. So.
Female athlete, student, and involved in the arts. And I suppose you volunteer around there too.
Yeah. Mostly hockey, but yeah.
Good for you. Well, congratulations. We're very proud of you. You can, or you can choose not to. Well, congratulations. We have a certificate for you here too. It's not great.
Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Mayor Mike Miser, and like we had last meeting, Mayor Miser is going to share with us State of the City. I think the same type of introduction. With Mayor Williams, we have a tremendous relationship working with the City of Prior Lake, a number of partnership agreements where we share resources, and it's beneficial to both of us, and And we appreciate your partnership and appreciate you giving us an update on what's going on in Prior Lake.
My pleasure, and I thank you all for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about what is happening at the city of Prior Lake. And then actually, because I sort of came out of nowhere, I typically have started this presentation, have been asked to start this well, once I get this thing running, to give a little background, actually, oops, why am I on that first one? My apologies. To give a little background about who I am. There we go. There's 1, 2, and now I've lost, there it is. Perfect. Is this up and running now? Can you all see this? Outstanding. So I really only have about 9 slides, which is pretty good for a politician, and I'm going to be pretty good at keeping to what I was requested, about a 10 minutes. So a little bit of background on who I am. I've been a resident for Prior Lake of 9 years. I am a part owner in a software company down in Shakopee called Energy Platforms, focused on energy efficiency for states and utilities. My passions outside of work and working for the city is hockey and barefooting, and barefoot water skier. And I very much love to travel. I've been to about 55 countries throughout my life. And because of that exploration, it was a family motto when I grew up that was the word try. And so within our family, it was no matter what that activity was, whether it's running for mayor, trying some new foods, going to visit new countries. So that's sort of steeped in who I am. And then finally, for the first time in my life, I got married last year in September. So I am a newlywed at the age of 49. Core values that drive me in my work for the city is number 1, honesty, integrity, and transparency. Number 2, open-mindedness. Probably coming from that ability to try in the family that was driven and to go explore and understand other worlds. So I have a very open mind. And then as that bullet point number 3, what I'm going to attempt to do, or I have attempted to do within our council meetings, is I borrowed this phrase that Stephen Covey once said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And that's really critical, that in anything you do, that you first make sure that you really understand what that other individual is saying, and do a good job to clarify and make sure you understand what their position is or their views before you then try and help them understand your own perspectives. Next bullet, decisions based on fact. We are driving within this city to some new metrics, new analysis, so that we are basing our decisions not necessarily just on emotion, but based on facts for all the decisions that we make within council. And then finally, I promised to the residents that I would never forget that I represent them. I have a balance to do with respect to taking care of staff, because they provide the services for the residents, but it's my job to represent those 25,000 residents, and again, not just the ones who voted for me in the election in 2009. 2010, our city council really almost for the first time decided to prioritize 3 things. We have a host of different goals and objectives that we have within the city to try and accomplish our 2030 vision. But there are, of course, all sorts of different things that we could focus our attention on. And we decided to limit it because we can't do everything today. So we wanted to focus on 3 things. And some of these 3 things I think dramatically impact actually some of our relationship with the school board, and some of the stuff you do can dramatically impact our top 3 priorities. And they were, number 1, economic development. For decades, Prior Lake has sort of stiff-armed businesses within our community. This new council then came in and decided that we are going to change some of that, and we're going to welcome economic development, and I'll get into some of the reasons why. Number 2, continued strong fiscal management. And again, I'm going to actually touch on those. And then finally, you might have recently heard a couple of our lakes within our community have been put on the impaired list. And so this council last year decided that it was going to ask for a more aggressive plan to clean up the lakes in 10 years. So on each one of those couple of points, the reason this council wanted to focus on economic development, number 1, is to attract, grow, and retain businesses within our community, because they do provide the jobs, the services, and a more stable and a broader tax base, so that we don't always have to rely on the residents for our tax base. Businesses typically contribute to the tax base, but they don't consume services like the residential folks do. So that gives us an opportunity to broaden those taxes over a broader base, lower the pressure to always increase our residential taxes. Services, I want to focus on maybe one of those, and it's actually on that final point, the C2 zoning ordinances. Every member of council who's been running for election has heard very loudly that why is it we always have to go to Savage or Shakopee for restaurants? Why don't we have more restaurants within our community? Well, one of the issues and one of the changes that we've already made then is we changed some of the C2 zoning ordinances to allow for alcohol at restaurants. And what I mean by C2 zoning, so many of the areas like at Highway 13 and 42, or some of the places down in Village Market and some of the old Napa areas, a restaurant couldn't locate there if they wanted to serve alcohol. And for restaurants to come in and only survive on providing food, they just wouldn't do it. They needed to be able to serve beer and wine or something like that at those meals. So we made some changes to try and open that up and bring more restaurants within our community. Second big thing that we did last year was we formed the Economic Development Authority. That was the organization that's going to be critically focused on what the plan and strategy is to bring business to Prior Lake. That has been an organization that has been moribund for about 7 or 8 years, and so we dusted that off. And we also made one big change that I think is worth noting. Typically, the EDA in Prior Lake had been made up of the city council members, but we decided to make a change in that and only have the new makeup have 2 members of city council and then 3 members from the business community. And we found 3 great people, a guy named Bob Morris, Terry Hitchcock, and Michelle Chowdek. 3 good business people with great experience on building and growing businesses. And so I'm pretty excited by what we've been able to add to our EDA, and we are currently formulating our plans and strategy to move the city of Prior Lake forward. I'm going to skip the next one. Strong financial management. For us, this boiled down to before we start adding in any new investments in any new services, we need to take care of the infrastructure that we already have in place. And what had happened for, again, something for decades within our community, we had not invested in the streets. And some of the streets were falling into disrepair, and of course, then we're all driving on this. But previous council, so this is not my council, but previous councils under Mayor Jack Haugen made the decision that they were going to undergo the street reconstruction program and accelerate that to get back on track so that our roads are in good order for our residents. So we're going to continue to invest in the assets that are already in place rather than focusing on any new services for the city. Second bullet point, additional metrics. To make this easier to understand our financials is part of this. As I mentioned, we're pretty data driven, and right now we don't have any good metrics that either council is making decisions on how well, how effective, how cost effective, how productive our staffs or our services are. We don't do any benchmarking against other communities to find out, again, are we doing a good job? Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. We don't know that today, but we're going to put some metrics in place so that we have better information at the council level to make better policy decisions. We'll have better information for staff, making decisions at the staff level for the services we offer. And then hopefully this will also provide more transparency to the residents so they have a better idea of what are the high-level goals that are important for the city, and that what are we doing to track and manage and see that we're on track for those items. Third bullet point, sustainable park plan. This is actually a good example of where, historically, when Prior Lake was going through some very, very rapid growth, the way that we had structured that, we have more parkland than just about any community. And parks are very critical to individuals' happiness within their community. But what happened in this very rapid growth, we often were putting parks very close to each other and both putting in, for example, active play sets. Well, a more reasoned view of this would be, do we really need to have active play sets at parks that are all of a few blocks apart? Maybe we don't, because we're setting ourselves up for a whole lot of maintenance in the years to come, as we would then have to replace those active play sets. So we're going to go back, we're stepping back, we're doing a rationalization of what is a good, appropriate level for the parks and the type of equipment at the different parks. And we'll also take into fact changing demographics, which can impact dramatically what kind of services you offer at your parks. This was an example of some of the metrics where typically, and I'm not even going to really get into the details on this, but typically our city council, the only metric sort of on financial is that we have a lower tax rate. We have a 28% tax rate. Well, it really didn't get back to what people are paying from their pocket for the services. So some of the metrics that we're looking at is now to look at the taxes per household and taxes per person, which give us a better idea of both the increases we're seeing and how effective we are at delivering these key services for our residents. Cleaning up the lakes. About 30% actually of all lakes in the state of Minnesota are now impaired, meaning they aren't healthy to be in very long. And I mean, the key lakes, of course, are Spring Lake and Upper Pryor, the two that are impaired. Some of the other ones within our communities are also impaired, but these are the key ones that are used obviously very much by our residents. And so this council, again, as I'd mentioned, it asked staff for a 10-year plan to take these lakes off of the impaired list. And what we have to do is remove the pollutants, and that's primarily the phosphorus. Now, one of the nice things I can tell you about our city staff already are doing some most creative, innovative stuff in the state, bar none. We've won a national award on the ability to actually, on how we put salt down and actually clean our roads to keep the snow off the roads and make, to eliminate the amount of chloride, the salt that we put down, and the sand that we put down. So we have some real innovative techniques that we put down a fraction of that, both saving us cost, the service is better because it's actually doing a better job, and our city staff did win an award, a national award for that effort. We also have some other stuff that if I had more time to tell you about it, but what's unique is that now Prior Lake, with this innovation and several other of those, we are being looked at by the state of Minnesota to take some of these innovations that we've done here in Prior Lake and spread those out to the rest of the community, within the rest of the state. In this, we work very closely with the Spring Lake, Prior Lake Spring Lake watershed and the WMO. And actually, I could even say this has now recently become a scale legislative agenda item for the first time to also focus on cleaning up our lakes. Two last things I want to tell you about. Two key things that are happening in our community that are going to have major ramifications for the next 30 years, or actually at least this one for the next 30 or 40 years. City Council of Prior Lake is making a decision on which option it chooses for County Road 21 as it goes through downtown Prior Lake. As County Road 21 is going to get punched up through the north up to 169, the amount of traffic that we're going to see on 21 is going to be going through the roof. We already have some very serious traffic problems and some safety issues at that 21 main intersection and Highway 13 that have to get addressed. The baseline option is to close off our downtown, basically separate it into two halves, and to allow, through traffic, but no foot pedestrian or no cross traffic by cars. That's the baseline option. The other option that really becomes an interest is to maybe look at taking County Road 21 and rerouting it a little bit south of the downtown portion, crossing 13 a little bit south of where the current intersection is, and then reconnecting with 21. That option would keep our downtown whole together and has some real positive economic impacts for our community. But it's, of course, a more expensive option. So this city council, in order to make some good fact-based decisions, has hired two companies, Bolton Menk, to do some construction cost estimates. So we really know what the cost of these, in total, really three options are from a construction perspective. And then we've hired a company called Maxfield to come in and do an economic evaluation to help us understand what is of the decisions that we have to make here of these three, what is the economic impact? And then actually, I should say there's a third company, Ellers, that's coming in to take a look at what's the tax impact for us on these three options. And I want to invite you, May 31st, 7 p.m., City Hall, is a second and final town hall meeting on this subject. But without a doubt, this decision will impact what Prior Lake looks like for the next 30 years. So please come out and join us. My sort of final one is one of the unique things that, again, Prior Lake has done is the 2030 vision and strategic plan. And that's this opportunity where the entire community, school board, and I hope, and Sue Ann, the rest of you folks, come out, participate in this, but it's schools, obviously the SMSC participates in this, some of our neighboring communities, the businesses, all come out and help us shape who we are, what we want to look like in the next 10, 20 years. We're going through a next iteration, next generation of the 2030 vision. It's a next level plan, much more detailed, much better plan. That item, May 21st from 8 to 5 p.m. I'd love to have all of you come out and join us and participate in what our community, in shaping our vision of what our community will look like in the next 20, 30 years. So with that, how'd I do for 10 minutes? Fairly good? No? Not bad?
Oh, you got a politician's 10 minutes.
Yeah, not bad. I want to, this is the invite on the 2030, so let me just give that to you. And
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Do we have any questions for Mayor Miser at this time?
But, I think, the economic aspect is intriguing to me in terms of, have you started to see anything? Because, certainly that, I think, has an impact on the school district also, because, obviously decisions that you make that are trying to drive or spread the taxes across, a larger pool have a direct impact on what our ability is as well. So, being on our finance committee, I'm kind of interested to hear where you're at with that and what the
EDA, over a couple of longer work sessions, have recently come up. We've now got our first draft of what we think our strategy and plan will be. So we're just formulating that. I mean, I'm very excited by some of the stuff that we're looking at, but it's probably not cooked, so I'll probably just hold off. But some stuff that I think will, and the one that I was just hearing about before coming to this meeting, that actually has a pretty positive impact on the residential side too. But we are after things to keep Prior Lake growing and growing in a positive fashion while minimizing taxes. So, and believe it or not, adding services. Surprise, surprise. But sometimes you got to wonder, there's that tyranny of the or. And you heard Andy Grove talk about the tyranny of the or. Typically people will look at and say, well, you can have this or you can have this. Well, we're rethinking that, thinking outside of the box and looking at different ways of how can we do things that will actually add services while still accomplish our goals and objectives on the financial stuff. But, I mean, we're very focused on metrics to look at our tax per person, tax per household, and we know that anything that might do, I don't want to say it will open up the door for other entities in taxing, because it's always an issue, obviously, for our residents, but so we're focused on doing that. We want to get ourselves growing again, both on the I mean, we're doing nothing to push off residential growth either.
And that was going to be my follow-up is, what type of traction are we seeing with, some of the building permits and, have we stabilized? Are we seeing any growth at all, or?
From our side right now, we had a target last year of a goal of 50 permits. So it was pretty low level of permits. We actually had 90 last year. A lot of that came in during that period of which the stimulus was going on, so we had a big kickoff there. We have an objective. We went up to about 60 permits this year. We're seeing some slow progress. It's hard to say that, whether we've really turned the corner yet. I mean, we're starting to get more activity. I can tell you that. There's more stuff coming to council than in the first 9 months in my term in office, so we're starting to see that. But, there were risks that maybe there was a second downturn, then those seemed to dissipate for a while now the hints back up, well, maybe we could because some of the job growth. But so I can't give you, I'd love to be able to give you a better answer on that, but I don't have a good, clear crystal ball.
We've got one of those 90 sitting at the cabinet table back there, don't we? Mr. Lund? Weren't you one of our building permits last year?
Yes, I was.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Sorry, I was reading.
That's okay.
School stuff.
Surprise, surprise. You know, that's the, and I didn't even make that point. You know, on the school, the reason that is so important, as you well know, probably one of the biggest decisions when parents are deciding on what community to move into is what are the schools like. And so you guys have a huge impact on that. And that's why, you know, our collaboration, our working together on all sorts of different things, whether it's the fiber optic ring, sharing of services, Club Prior, some joint community ed stuff that we do together. What else do we do? I mean,
Well, scale.
scale, really.
Services, providing our operations and making sure we're efficient. So if you're mowing the grass, are we striping the greens, or how are we sharing those services with PLA-wide, with the city, and with the school district?
City fields, I think there are 4 city fields that are frequently used by some of the sports teams, so there's lots of stuff. Obviously, we've all gone through this tough time together. We're still good friends. We're going to get back to better times and growing our community, take some of the pressure off some of all the cost cutting that needs to be done, and I'm sure you guys would like to see that as well, but I would assume that that could return some of those kind of service levels too as we get better going forward.
I think one of the most important partnerships continues to be the police liaison.
Yep.
And I know that's on our agenda for this evening, but Officer O'Hara is such a valuable resource for DARE, for any incidents that come up. Just being that presence and that force, I think, has been a real positive and a great win for us in our collaboration.
It's probably a good point, and it's probably for 2 reasons. Not only for what it might do for you at the school, but then longer term, those kids develop a relationship with the police.
Right.
That they're not somebody just driving by in a car down their street, so they get to know some of them one-on-one. And I've heard frequently from our police chief, that has a positive impact over then the life of that individual living in our community, that they have a relationship with the police. So those things are all great that we do together. You know, it's how we're building a stronger community. And it is. It's not just each one of us operating in a silo. And that is, you know, the benefit of scale, bringing us together, that we knock down those silos and we figure out how to work together to build a stronger community.
One question I had, Lee and I have both served on the strategic planning committee. I'm not sure if you have, Mike, or not. But and as we do our strategic plan, the question of annexation continues to come up, and I know there was an annexation plan that's been delayed somewhat. Is it time to start thinking about that, or is that, what's your timeline for looking at that process again?
Well, we are revisiting that because of the timeline changes. And everybody know the orderly annexation agreement is the agreement Prior Lake has with Spring Lake, that as development occurs, we will annex those properties into the city at the times that development allow us to bring services cost effectively to those communities. So we have had to revisit those timelines, make adjustments in the agreement, because we still want to do the orderly annexation. So we're adjusting the timelines in those at this stage. We're starting to see, again, there are a couple of little projects starting to move forward or that we're hearing about. So I would still expect that to continue once we still get some further building and further progress within our community. And seriously, some of the EDA stuff that we were talking about today could have a real positive impact for drawing people into this community. Some stuff very few communities have for services.
Well, as good schools bring, help hold property values and attract new residents are certainly
We feed on each other. Yeah. Actually, no, I'm going to tell you this one because we're talking about it, but it's not done, it's not cooked, no decisions made. Fiber to the home. And I want to talk about that because of the impact. We know there's 2 key areas where this kind of service can have a big impact: medical and education. So that's the only reason I share that with you, because that could be something that could be a boon actually for our community too, that not many communities are taking this leadership, as we just heard from the individuals who were talking to us today, that are looking at it as seriously as we are.
Good. Anything else from Mayor Miser? Well, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, and thanks again for the time. I appreciate it. Nice to see you all again.
Thank you.
I will leave a couple of copies of these for anybody else who's welcome. Let's know what that one was.
Comes in uniform.
Just okay.
Right from the cockpit.
28 minutes.
Well, he landed safely.
Exactly.
It was a screeching halt, but he made it here. At this point in time in our meeting is when we open it up to our residents for open forum to discuss any item that they'd like to in front of the school board that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to address the board this evening? Seeing no one, we'll move on to personnel. Matt? Approval of candidates?
All right. Good evening, members of the board, and Dr. Groover. First, I would like to recommend the following candidates for employment and am seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the candidates as presented in your board packages this evening?
I'll make the motion.
By Mike, second? Second. By Tom. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. District retirements, Matt.
Next, I'd like to present the retirement of Richard Stine from Twin Oaks Middle School. And I'd just like to say that over the last couple of months, I've gotten to know Richard much better and work with Richard. And it's been a pleasure, and I've seen him with students at Twin Oaks, and I can say that he will be missed.
Do I have a motion to approve Mr. Steinhoff's retirement?
I'll make the motion.
By Mike, second?
A second.
By Lee. Any questions or comments?
I should at least say something. I never had him as a teacher, but he was my coach in 10th grade baseball. And, we loved having Stine as our coach back then, and I know he retired from coaching baseball quite a few years ago. But both the students that he had in class and the athletes that played for him always, I think, enjoyed spending time with Rick, and he'll be missed, as all the others that have are retiring this year. So thanks, Mr. Steinhoff.
I'd just like to add to that. I knew Mr. Steinhoff as a student as well, and back when he was in the high school, he did a great job connecting with students. Both of my children have had him through middle school. He's had a positive influence on youth in this community for a long, long time. It doesn't even say how many years, but it's got to be at least 31, 32 years.
I don't have the years in front of me. They actually came at a previous board meeting when we had presented.
Right.
34? Dan's saying 34?
34. I know I knew it was in the 30s, and I'm happy for him, and I hope he enjoys his retirement, but he's going to be missed very much.
And could I just add that Rick's classroom, his IT industrial tech classroom, is one that I've visited a couple of different times, and it seems like it's always when they're doing something having to do with a sharp instrument. And he has the students absolutely in the palm of his hand at every moment. They know exactly what's expected of them. They know exactly what they need to do, and they do it. And it doesn't matter if there are 24 students in there or sometimes 31 or 32. He is in command. And what you might not know is he got to design the industrial tech area at Twin Oaks when they moved over there. And it is to his specifications. And it is a well-tuned machine. Everything in there is exactly where it needs to be. And he's leaving quite a legacy as he leaves us in October. So we wish him well in all of his endeavors.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Leaves of absence.
Next, I present the following leaves of absence and am seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the leave of absences as presented? By Todd, second. Second. By Tom. All those, any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. As part of the agenda approval process, we separated teacher tenure and continuing contract from non-renewals, so we'll just take those first two pieces.
Right. With that, I present the administrator's recommendations for teacher tenure and continuing contract, and I'm seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve tenure and continuing contracts as presented?
I'll make the motion.
By Lee, second.
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Next, we have the recommendation for non-renewal.
Present the following recommendations for non-renewal, and I'm seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the non-renewals as presented? By Rich. Second?
Second.
By Tom. Any questions or discussion?
I guess the only comment I'd make is it's sad that we have to have some of these teachers on non-renewal. I wish that they could stay. I know that there's some really good teachers in this group, and I'm really sad that we have to let them go. So, and I will be abstaining on this vote.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, an abstention. That motion carries 6-0 with one abstention. That takes care of personnel items.
We've got one more personnel.
Oh,
item.
one more. I'm sorry. Teacher placement of unrequested leave of absence. Sorry.
And so lastly, I would like to present the recommendations for teacher placement on unrequested leave of absence, and I'm seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the unrequested leaves of absence as presented?
So moved.
By Rich. Second.
I'll second it.
By Mike. Any questions or discussion?
Once again, I'll say the same thing. These are not a lot of good teachers, again, that we're having to say goodbye to, and it's really sad and unfortunate we have to do it.
Well, I'll just take a moment to echo that. I was, there are some teachers here who have been with us for a very, very long time, who have done a tremendous job of engaging students, are not only involved with just teaching their classes and going home, but stay involved through co-curriculars in the community, in churches, in volunteer work. These are people who are ingrained and while non-renewing, anybody, I think these are the people that have really committed to us, and this is probably one of the more difficult votes I think I'll have to make.
I agree.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. That takes care of personnel items. And with no old business, we'll go on to the technology department restructure. Mr. Holmberg.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Groover. I'm here tonight to present to you the organizational chart for the technology department. Over a year ago, I was charged with merging the technology department under the curriculum instruction and assessment umbrella. And over the past year, we've had multiple phases and steps to that process, looking at department efficiencies, looking at personnel, and looking at really forward thinking. What is the 21st century going to lead to? What do we need to have in place? Meanwhile, the delicate balance of making sure our current hardware and software continues to run, and our staff continues to have the support that they need, and students have the support to continue to do the learning that is essential for today and poises to move forward into the future. This is a organizational chart that I've shared with each of you. I do want to make a couple notes about it and speak to it a little bit. It is in your board packet. Again, it's for that connection for CIA, and essentially this started last year. One of the first steps I did was to have someone come in and do a technology audit, and there were multiple recommendations. I shared those with you last September regarding things that needed to happen within technology, and this organizational chart does reflect that, and I will be talking about them in just a minute. But essentially there were three things that we need to look forward or look at when we're seeing technology. One is greater efficiency. Another one is continuing to build on the expertise of our technology, but also building and bringing additional skill sets in to assist us in moving forward. And meanwhile, the ultimate goal is still providing that greater support and service to our users throughout the district, whether it be staff, whether it be students, and moving forward for 21st century. There are a couple things I do, as I mentioned, want to point out. There are two areas here that are not part of the technology department, and I certainly don't want this to show that it does, even though it does show that it does. Rather, that part, those are existing positions, our professional development team, as well as our media specialists. But this is to demonstrate that connection that with our next steps that the district needs to look forward to in making sure that we're integrating technology effectively and appropriately in the classroom, as well as providing the training support to all staff to use technology in order to do their jobs efficiently. And so our professional development team of Eric Service and Sheila Erpenbach have been working on technology integration efforts, most particularly smart boards, over the last 2 years. But we need to expand that. We need to bring on additional things and bring forward those training components and technology that we're already seeing a need for. The other area is the media specialist. It was specifically identified in the audit that the media specialists in this group, in this district, when it comes to technology integration, are an underutilized group. Media specialists have that expertise of integration, knowing the cutting edge current technologies. We need to bring them into the fold. And so this represents a connection or a collaborative effort to start moving the district forward in integration. It does not say that they're under the technology umbrella. So moving forward with the technology, staffing, you will see the technology coordinator, which after this report, I'll transition with the board chair's approval toward that hire, as well as a data specialist, technology secretary, technology support technicians and field techs, network server specialists, and a technician as well. In this restructure, one of the key pieces that needed to be held intact is that we needed to use existing dollars. For this restructure, there was no new dollars put into technology for this restructure to happen. So with that, I just wanted to provide you an update on the technology and on the structure moving forward. Are there any questions?
Not so much a question, comment. I appreciate the effort that you put into this, and being able to do it at no cost is great. Now, my understanding is that this isn't a final plan, that there'll be more detail coming in this plan, so we won't be approving it tonight?
This is only a report at this point.
Okay, so there'll be more detail coming
Correct.
When our technology coordinator is approved and
Yes.
we can get more detail. Okay. This reminds me a little bit of our CIP process from the past. The better part of this one is that you're not asking for money. And you're able to still make an efficient use of what we have. So I appreciate that and look forward to similar things happening in other areas. Thank you.
Just a quick question. I know we've discussed it in the past, but the addition of a technology coordinator, we've had a technology director in our district before. That was part of a budget cut that led to this kind of falling under your umbrella. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the old role and what we expect out of the new role?
Yes, I would certainly do that. This may segue a little bit into the next part of the technology coordinator, but one of the key pieces that I found in looking at this department, as well as looking at the results from the audit, is that for sure there needed to be a greater level of technology support and proficiency. We have to have things that work. Staff have to be able to utilize the technology that's presently in place and continue to move forward with additional technologies. That's obviously a key part of this coordinator position. The second part of the coordinator position is that integration and understanding of how technology impacts the classroom. And looking at this, that's the other key part of this coordinator position that the previous position did not have. This organizational chart still reflects the budget reductions of the past and the reductions of the director position. This coordinator position is a hands-on position with technical support as well as integration and providing support to staff.
Thank you. Any other questions on the technology plan as drafted tonight? And there'll be other pieces coming before the board on this, is what we were just talking about?
Yes, there'll be the flow chart as well as a couple of job descriptions that will need to be revised. The one position of the telephone video network server technician, that is in the draft stages at this time, that will be coming forward for board approval.
Okay. So this was a report only, and we'll move on to the approval of the technology coordinator.
I would like to bring forward a personnel item, the technology coordinator position. We had an interview team convened. Tom Anderson served on that interview team, as well as we had staff at secondary and elementary level, as well as technology department staff. In your board package, you will see the information for Mr. Marcus Milazzo. You will see that some of his qualifications, he is currently the technology coordinator at Faribault Public Schools and has been there for the last several years. And you can see that he certainly has a background in technology support and proficiencies in that area. And additionally, he also has a background in teaching and maintains a current teaching license, which is critical to our understanding and moving forward with integration efforts. So I do bring forward that position and recommendation of approval of his hire.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve Mr. Milazzo as technology coordinator?
I'll make that motion.
By Tom, second.
Second.
By Todd. Thank you very much for putting up with my tied tongue. Any questions or discussion?
I'd like to have him come up to the mic.
Yes. We didn't want to preempt anything, but yes, I've asked Mr. Milazzo to address the board.
And just to say that this plan was reviewed, as Mr. Holmberg said, with all the board members ahead of time. We knew that as the plan was coming together, this was a critical piece. We certainly want Mr. Milazzo to help refine the plan once he gets a chance to see our operation and our needs. And so we started this before we had the, even a more fleshed out plan. So thank you. Welcome, Marcus.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Gruber. My name is Marcus Milazzo, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. I'm very excited to get started and be a member of the team. I look forward to working with the students, faculty, and staff of our district. The mission of our information technology department is to provide state-of-the-art hardware, software, peripherals, support, and training to all stakeholders. That's very important. Our team will move this district forward in information technology. We will do so while being fiscally responsible. And that is my pledge to you. Thank you for your time.
Well, certainly technology is becoming a more important part of our curriculum every year. So once we take a vote, we'll welcome you aboard.
Thank you.
All those in favor of Mr. Milazzo as technology coordinator signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Welcome aboard.
Could I just say?
Yes.
Marcus, before you go too far away, you have been driving from St. Paul to Faribault,
Yes.
and before that, it was St. Paul to
Litchfield.
Litchfield.
Yes.
So St. Paul to Prior Lake Savage sounds.
It's exactly 28 miles and 30 minutes.
And would you like to tell us a little bit about your family?
Yes, my wife Sarah is a teacher at Humboldt High School in St. Paul. We have a daughter, Sophia. She will be 6 on May 20th, and she attends Randolph Heights Elementary as a kindergartner. And we have Frank, who attends preschool at Sandcastle, and he's about 1.5 years. Okay.
And we were very impressed by your credentials, by the phone calls we received from Faribault before we even interviewed you, before the team did, saying how strongly they believe in you and in your ability to lead, and what a team player you are. So we're really looking forward to having you join our team and be a part of this ongoing evolution of technology in our district. So thank you for your commitment to us.
Thank you. Very excited.
Thank you. Well, we're thrilled to have you. Okay, Mr. Holmberg, you're still up with proposal for a study.
Yes. You have in your board packets an overview of this study. I'm bringing this study on behalf of Dr. Groover and myself to form a group to continue to study and have a dialogue on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and immersion opportunities for our schools in the future. Membership of this committee will include teachers, parents, community experts, school board representatives, and administrators. We anticipate the process to begin the summer of 2011 with the study of the best practice in those areas, visits to other school districts that have current models in STEM or immersion, and meetings to bring the results back to you for consideration. Our proposed recommendation from the study group, we anticipate as a timeline to be made to the school board by late fall 2011 with regarding any future programs or steps moving forward for district elementary schools. We also have our committee roster in the packet as well. So this proposal has been presented to the District Curriculum Advisory Committee for review and comment, and at that point we recommended we bring it forward for board consideration. So you have it here tonight.
Do I have a motion to adopt the proposal for study for STEM and immersion as presented?
I'd kind of like to make the motion, if I could.
Motion made by Mike, second
I'll second that.
by Tom. Any questions or discussion?
I'd just like to make one or two comments that, this is, for me personally, a culmination of a desire for at least the study to be done, and I've shared that, I think, in private and in public multiple times since I've been on the board, and I'm excited that it's including not only the language immersion, which I certainly have had a passion for, but also the STEM component. I think both of those things it's a good time for us to look at, and that's really been my request for several years is let's at least look, and if the community feels like there's enough support that there's a critical balance to do this, I think that's wonderful, and if we go through and it becomes fruition in the district, that'll be wonderful. If not, if we find that it's not the right thing, then at least we've done the study, and I think that's, as a school board member, what I think we owe the community. So I'm really excited to not only be part of the committee for sure, but just the fact that we're doing it. So thank you, Dr. Groover and Mr. Holmberg for driving this to make it happen.
I can tell you that we're very excited about having this opportunity to do this study. It's taken some time, but we've put feelers out in our community of our new parents coming forward, as well as our current parents, and they really believe that these are the two topics that need to be researched further. And I know that when you look at that committee roster, you'll see names of school board members, Mike Murray being one of them, and Tom Anderson and Rich Wolf, that will help guide this, as well as our administrators and teachers and parents. We've had many parents come forward that want to be part of this, and so we have parent representatives that will help guide and work through this. So we'll be bringing this back for further conversation as the study progresses.
Well, I think we've heard for several years that immersion is certainly a key area of interest of our parents. We know that both state and national trends have been towards more science and technology, and I think this fits right in with where our strategic plan kind of tells us that we need to go, and I can't think of three better board members to be on the STEM portion of this, at least. Whether happenstance or on purpose, I'm excited to have you guys on it, and I know all three of you have a passion for it. So I'm going to wait and see what you guys come up with in the fall. Yes.
I assume this is going to take a series of meetings over a series of quite long time. And I guess I'm asking if we could get some updates along the way.
Sure.
Because I think immersion is a concept that a lot of us aren't real familiar with, and especially in the community. I mean, I've heard about it for a number of years, courtesy of Mike, but from others as well. And I think that it would be really good if we could keep the community involved as to what you're talking about, what it's all about, starting even from a definition of what immersion looks like. So if you could come back to some of our future meetings with that, that'd be great. Or a committee member.
I can certainly do that.
Thank you.
And just one
Yes, sorry.
clarification. These are going to be aimed mainly at the elementary programs?
At this time, that's our study, is looking at starting in the elementary. We do have middle school and high school reps on there. Certainly, as we go through this process, we know that we want to be thoughtful about what the track is for these students going up through the secondary level. Certainly, with the 6-period day and having Spanish at 6th grade, we've got a language connection there too, as well as some Project Lead the Way courses for middle school students going on into high school. But if we're going to look at starting something in elementary, from an alignment standpoint, we have the reps there to be able to provide that input and that expertise.
Thank you.
And, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't, I see one of our building principals that's going to be on the committee. So, Barb, thank you for volunteering to step forward. So I look forward to working with you on this.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. And are you up for the K-12 math and science
I
curriculum?
am, and I brought company with me. As we're getting things set up here, I'd like to introduce to you Lindsay Comstock, Jeffers Pond 5th grade teacher, Sandy Timmerman, Westwood 5th grade teacher, Kirby Miners, high school science, Janine Mesnick, high school math, and Kara Rickenberg, environmental education. And these folks are committee representatives that served on the K-12 science and math curriculums. And we've got the presentation here for you this evening. Moving forward. First off, I'm going to just give a brief overview of the presentation. We'll talk about the committee memberships for both groups, curriculum review process in a nutshell, what these committees did. Kara Rickenberg will talk about the evaluation of materials. The committee reps will share the recommendations as well as just insights from the committee through the process. Just want to make a note that with technology being such a huge part of now and moving forward, all the recommendations for adoption include technology resources for students, parents, and teaching staff throughout the life of the curriculum adoption, which includes textbooks, assessments, interactive lessons, and activities. Kara will also talk about implementation and professional development, and then I'll wrap up with next steps. So, our curriculum review process, our science committee, as you can see, is a healthy group. I would like to point out to you that this is a group that's been working on the science portion of the curriculum for the past 2 years, from elementary staff, secondary staff, and resource members of Tim Bell, John Bennett, Dan Edwards, and Kara and myself. And throughout the process, Kara and I co-facilitated this process through the group. The math committee had an equally amount of staff members on the committee. I just want to point out to you and recognize these individuals. The recommendations that are coming forward to you tonight is the culmination of a lot of hard work, dedication, countless hours, time, meeting and conversations as committee members as well as with their colleagues. As we look at some of the members on both the science and the math committee, some of these individuals have served on these committees for quite a few years. And bringing that experience and sharing that experience about Prior Lake Savage and how the students and how the buildings have taught math and how they've taught science have been increasingly important for our school district, an important part of the process too. Putting their names up there certainly recognizes there's a lot of work when it comes to a curriculum adoption, particularly the research, particularly evaluation of materials, but ultimately to the next steps. After the recommendation comes the implementation. And so really there's a few other steps coming down the road. And so they're still behind me, and I'm confident that they're going to continue to work with me through the implementation. And so I publicly just want to say and really commend these individuals for their hard work as we move forward. The recommendations that you will hear tonight have the endorsement of both committees moving forward. So just an overview of the review process. All review process look at the academic standards in math and science. And seeing that the state has gone through some changes in the standards, That has taken some time. It's taken a great deal of time to really look at what were the standards as well as what are the new standards that are coming forward. How do they correlate? Have they moved grade levels? Have they moved to a different class or course? And figuring out, okay, what do we do and how do we need to best address where those standards are reflected for student learning. The next part is certainly looking at research. What's the research say on instructional strategies or methods or particular practices in math and science? We also look at current student achievement data. I've shared with the school board, the results of our student results for MCAs. We have strong results. The history has been a good one of solid student achievement. But I know the question has come through both committees is that are we reaching all students? And certainly we're finding that there's some students we're not reaching that we need to give more assistance and help to in order to understand science and math. So that brings us back to the research-based best practices. What are instructional strategies for those student groups? What are the methods and practices that we need to look at? What are the things that we're currently doing that are working so well for our students? Because we certainly want to continue doing those moving forward and look at, are there different ways, are there other ways that we can be teaching math and science? Throughout the process, last year and this year, we've brought the research, brought the information forward to the District Curriculum Advisory Committee for review, input, comment, and this recommendation has come through them also. And finally, we also have budget parameters. The district does set aside an amount for yearly curriculum adoption, and both recommendations that are coming forward to you in math and science are estimated to be within the budgeted amounts. For the next school year, we have a budgeted amount of $300,000, and the following school year, a budgeted amount of $300,000. So, our curriculum vendors that we worked with in the review of the materials, they knew this. They knew our budget up front. Our committee knew that budget up front, and we were diligent about staying within that budget number and working with our vendors to be sure that we were getting a solid program, but also making sure we understood what are the components that were essential that students need for learning and teachers need for teaching. I'm going to turn it over to Kara to share about the evaluation.
Starting last September, October, we started gathering potential vendor names from local districts, vendors that committee members had heard about, and started sending out feelers. Do you have what we're looking at? Last year we had created a strengths and weaknesses analysis. We had kind of framed up what we were looking for. We're familiar with the standards, like Jeff had mentioned, and sent out the feelers. And then in November we had the initial vendor presentations. From those groups, from both K-12, both science and math, kind of whittled it down according to the budget parameters as well as the correlations to our strengths of what we were looking for. From that point, then, we started a curriculum material rotation. And the last time math and science were reviewed, there wasn't quite as many elementary schools. So that material rotation was quite the process, thanks to Jim and Daryl for helping us schlep many boxes around the district. All of our teachers were able to see all of the materials. They were rotated through. They were in the buildings for a week plus at a time. The committee members presented it to them, so teachers really had a hands-on digging through, looking at different things. We had the vendors reps come back for a second and final presentation. We invited more teachers at the table. Some parents were there, district community, or district curriculum staff, and other administrators were at the table. We sent out surveys to the elementary teachers, got feedback in the secondary levels, and just kind of really narrowed it down to our top 2 choices. And from there, more discussions happened. This has been a process happening, since 2 years ago, but formally with the vendors since November. And many, many, many hours of discussion have happened. With elementary science, which you'll hear about, I don't even know how many hours we've had, and they were great and awesome conversations that we've had. We looked at the survey feedback. We went and looked at different schools. We went and visited Shakopee and sat with their teachers for a full day, talking to them about what they've chosen for math and looking forward with that. And then we've established our final recommendations. So I will have science come on up and share with you their recommendations.
I'm here to present elementary science, and tonight I am happy to announce we've chosen National Geographic, which is a major change for us in the district this year. We've been with FOSS for about 21 years. It started in primary, and then the second time of adoption, it moved to the intermediate grade levels. Science and the national standards for many years was based on hands-on, and FOSS was the best hands-on program out there. It really led us in the direction we had kids in science, touching science every single day in the classroom. But as we moved to state standards, it became really, really clear. Science testing, state standard testing told us that FOSS does have some weaknesses. We were hopeful in this adoption that FOSS would come with some changes and tell us how they were going to meet the standards, and we were sad to see that they really hadn't made any changes. And so at that point, our committee had to look at how can we make that balance. We still want the hands-on, and we felt that National Geographic gave us that. There was lots and lots of discussion. It did come down to 3 vendors, FOSS being in there, and when we did our final vote, FOSS ended up being our lowest on the totem pole when we had 2 left to go. With that, there was lots and lots of discussion, and to meet all the needs at all grade levels, K-5, we felt National Geographic would do that. It has hands-on. It is very inquiry-based. It has depth. One of the things our upper elementary has lacked is reading that goes along with science investigation. And they get to middle school, and all of a sudden we have our middle school teachers having to teach that. This has that. They will actually be looking at textbooks that are from National Geographic photographers. So they've got that depth there. They've got that breadth there. We can also, one of the things science is lacking is math and reading get such a focus right now with RTI. It's hard sometimes to get that science in. National Geographic is allowing us some integration, bringing our reading, our nonfiction reading, into our reading area, not just in our science area. We also looked at National Geographic as having great potential for STEM. They have the engineering components within there, and it'd be very easy to bring that with us if we would choose to use STEM. So we wanted to make sure the science program did that. So I feel like our committee came to a really good decision, and I think it will help to strengthen the science program at the elementary level. Plus, I really think that it's also going to be a strong bridge from elementary to middle school.
From the secondary point of view, I'd like to second that. We're very excited at the choice they made. Our views on FOSS are fairly well known. We shudder at the name. And so we were really excited that they're going into something that we perceive as having more rigor to it, so that when they do get into the secondary world where they're being hit with a lot more information and the expectations of the testing, they'll already have a much stronger background than what we've been expecting from FOSS. So we're really excited by what they've chosen. At the secondary level, we didn't probably have quite as much heartache in our choices. It really came down to we were hoping to try and just get one vendor, of course, for economic reasons, and it just did not work out. We had also had a vendor that we'd been using for quite a while in our middle and ninth grade programs, Prentice Hall, who had been kind of setting the bar for that level of science curriculum, and they came to us with the exact same materials that they sold us last time. I mean, same stuff, same technology, same books, and that just doesn't cut it in this day and age. So we're kind of sad to see them go, and moved in a different direction. The other thing that was a little bit strange is there's a big movement now towards consumables. Now, some of you, like me, may remember consumables, and they were a big thing for a while, and then people moved away, kind of because you realize if you're using a consumable book and you're throwing it out at the end of every year, if you're teaching your state standards, and they've written that book for Texas, and a third of that book you're never going to use, that's just tremendous amount of waste. And in a district that really prides itself on environmental education, we couldn't be a part of that. Luckily, Glencoe, which in the past has been a company that is outstanding for making their materials very student-oriented, but had a weakness in their rigor, has really raised their game. Their materials are still excellent. The kids like to look at them as much as they like to look at any science book. They're readable. Their technology is easy to understand, even for those of us who aren't so good at it. And yet now they've added to that the rigor that we demand now with our high-stakes testing that's coming into play more and more. So middle school and ninth grade will use Glencoe. We're glad to see that ninth grade will have that bridge. We'll still be using the same publisher as the middle school. Biology is going to go with Holt. Holt has a brand new biology curriculum that is just taking the old one, which was the #1 seller, and just updating it, adding things in terms of making different levels of readership available, not only for the book, but for labs and teacher material that's provided to us. Chemistry is going with Pearson Prentice Hall. We, as a group of 4 chemistry teachers, each took the book separately, went away, came back ready to battle, and we all chose the same book. When 4 different people with very different approaches all can come to that conclusion, we know it's strong material. Physics is going with Holt. One of our goals that we set with Jeff was that as much as possible we would try to go back and use the same publisher. We really came down to 2 possible choices with physics. There wasn't a lot to distinguish between them other than the fact that one of them we were not using in any other core subject area, so we went with the Holt book. And then beyond that, with our one-time courses, for the most part, they're Pearson. Pearson really has the strength when it comes to the AP courses. They write a lot of books for introductory college-level courses and the higher-level high school courses. Many times the colleges and high schools will use the same books, and they just produce really nice material. It's not as readable as what we would expect the other classes to have, but those are kids who are reaching for a different standard, so we expect a little bit more difficulty and a lot more vocabulary in those. And lastly, our concepts classes, for the first time since I've been here, we're actually going to have a book for chemistry concepts. Somebody finally realized that if we're going to teach chemistry to students, all our students, which we're moving in that direction now with the state requirements, they need to write one for kids who just aren't so strong at math. And Glencoe put one of those out, and we're very excited to be moving towards it. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm here to recommend that elementary adopts the math expressions curriculum. When we were looking at the curriculums, there were a number of things for math expressions that were appealing to us. Probably the biggest thing is that math expressions meets all learners' needs, from special ed all the way up to the gifted and talented students. It also has an RTI component embedded within the curriculum, which is something that's really nice for our elementary. Math expressions also has a strong number sense, and they start algebraic thinking already in kindergarten. And so they're building on that algebraic thinking all the way through. So that will be a very strong transition to the middle school with that algebraic piece to it.
At the high school level, we felt particularly lucky because our final choices really met the things that we needed to have, our must-haves that Jeff Holmberg had previously outlined. And we were really able to just go through the things that we felt met the unique needs of our district for students, for parents, technology, and really for flexibility with how we're working things in math right now. For grades 6 through 10, we went with the Glencoe series, and we really felt that that was strong with technology and with flexibility, specifically at the middle school levels. And then additionally at the high school, you'll see that we have several authors, different textbooks, because we really need to meet high school and college, that bridge right there. And also AP comes into that a little bit, but there is not a one-size-fits-all for 11th and 12th grade, so we do have a couple of different authors at that level.
To get our teachers ready for these, for the implementation and professional development, in the elementary, we are starting with science for next year. So National Geographic will be implemented for the 2011-2012 school year. The reason that science is going first is because the new standards. The new standards were drafted 2 years ago, and they go into place starting next year. The math standards are the exact same as they have been the last 3 years, 2007. They were last updated, so math expressions will go into effect on the 2012-2013 year. And the reason that we're doing that is because it would inundate our elementary teachers to have 2 core curriculums implemented at the same time. The secondary timeline, math and science have identified different priorities for the different subjects, textbook adoptions, and so both departments will be implementing the new curriculum resources each year. So next year, some of the math and science 612, and the following year, the other courses. In elementary, there will be a small group, though, that will do a staged implementation of the math expressions. So some of our committee members and other teachers who are interested in moving forward and kind of gaining that experience and getting their feet wet with the math expressions implementation. As far as professional development goes, the week after school, the 13th through the 16th, both committees will convene and look at the materials at hand, the courses and the grades that we'll be implementing for next school year. We'll definitely take a more rigorous approach in getting prepared for the August trainings and workshops. In fall, we'll have vendors come, give materials, or give an overview to the different grade levels and different departments that we'll be implementing next year. Our early release times and staff development days will be devoted to the the implementation for math and science. In the secondary levels, the vertical teams for the departments will meet on a regular and consistent basis for collaboration amongst themselves. And then in the elementary, we are working towards implementation teams. Elementary math and science has not had a change for almost 20 years in both of them. And so we are moving forward with a very strong teacher-supported model where we'll be meeting quarterly as a team and quarterly as grade levels so that they can have the confidence and knowledge to move forward and support our student learning as we move into 2 new curriculums.
This next slide regarding next steps, Kara's already alluded to, but just a few things I want to point out is that as we start planning curriculum and writing curriculum, we'll start archiving those on our curriculum shared so that all staff have access to it across the district. We'll start to look at the technology materials that are coming with all of these programs and looking at how we can adjust those and factor those into our teaching. And finally, as we start going through next year, we will start looking at and revising our curriculum frameworks and maps. As Kara mentioned, FOSS was adopted 21 years ago, and everyday math has been in the district for 18 years. And so our curriculum maps will need revision, but it also goes to show too that we need to start moving a different direction. And we're confident that the recommendations coming forward today are going to lead us there, take us there. I believe Sandy already referenced this earlier in the presentation, that both of these recommendations, the materials that are coming, will have the resources and foundational materials to support us in our work with STEM, with our planning and our research and our study. So we're certainly positioned in a way to move forward given where our study may lead us. And we'll just continue to monitor and adjust instruction to assessment. Anytime you implement new curriculum, there's a considerable amount of time, learning, understanding. It takes time. The committees that I shared at the beginning of the presentation have had their heads wrapped around this for, at least since November when they started seeing materials. We have a considerable amount of staff out there that are not on the committee that will also need time and support in order to understand the materials, monitor, adjust, and implement those materials to the full fidelity to which they were intended to be taught. And finally is really ongoing communication with the district stakeholders. For sure with teachers, but also with changing 2 major curriculums after many years of implementation. We need to communicate with our community and our parents and students about different language, different processes, different ways of doing things moving forward. So with that, though, these are the recommendations, and if you have any discussion or have any questions for the committee, we can do so now.
Oh, sorry, Tom, yes.
I have one comment and one question. I was able to actually sit in on one of the presentations for math, and this is not the curriculum I grew up with. The technology, I was kind of blown away, and I was happy to see the amount of technology that was being used, and the reason being is we have 2 kids in the high school and they'd rather be in front of a computer or use technology as opposed to a textbook, which I'm glad to see that there's a lot of the technology in there. The other question I have is, because we don't change curriculum very often, with 20 years or whatever, and standards tend to change as the sun sets sometimes. Are these curriculums very adaptable? As standards change, they have to learn something in third grade instead of fourth, things like that?
That has been going on for many years.
Mm-hmm.
The standards change, programs and initiatives come and go, and curriculum cycles typically are on a 6 to 7 year window of when you purchase and then you implement and then you come around and start that all up. I think in the past when you put something in a binding and between two hard covers, you're pretty well set. I mean, you're either moving chapters, you're supplementing, you're finding additional materials to meet the standards or to, try to make it fit to what the state is telling you to be able to do. What we really have an opportunity here is with the technology, curriculum vendors are becoming a lot more intelligent about how they deliver those materials, and that their updates, well, we'll still have the hardcover textbooks, but we'll have all of the online materials and textbooks online. And if there's any updates, if there are any adjustments to the standards, those will come through our technology. Those will come through the website. Those will come directly to our teachers. And lastly, one of the things I know we've been diligent about, I've been diligent about in working with the vendors, is that we're entering into a partnership of 6 to 7 years with these curriculums. In the past, I think professional development has always been, well, with the first year, we'll just train everybody and then thank you very much and we'll see you again 6 to 7 years. But our commitment from all of these vendors is ongoing training when our staff members need it, at the beginning, throughout, and at the end, and when there are changes or when there are significant improvements to the program that staff need to be trained on or need further in-service on. And so I'm excited to hear about that. Professional development is a pretty hard piece to try to match everyone's needs, and when you're trying to center it around the curriculum, the people that should be in the room are the ones who wrote the curriculum, put the curriculum together, and I'm excited to say that they're going to continue working with us throughout the life of the adoptions.
Yes, Mike.
First of all, I'd like to compliment both groups for math and science. Being on the curriculum committee and the updates we got, it was very obvious a lot of hard work went into this. And then thank you to the representatives, Sandy and Kirby, Lindsay, Janine, Karen, and Jeff for coming up tonight to present to us. As we went through this, I really was impressed that I think all the groups were very open-minded from the get-go. And I think, if you weren't, I don't think that you would be coming forward with the recommendations that you are, that we're going to be making very significant changes, certainly at the elementary level, but I think even at the secondary level, we're going to see some changes take place that'll be new for many of your colleagues. And even on the FOSS decision, I think it would have still been easy for you to have said, well, you know what, we could get by doing this and this. And I think it was very clear as a committee member of the curriculum committee that was not the intent of the group, that you really truly put the needs of the students driven from the standards, but really, their needs first and foremost, and really drove it from that. And certainly on the math especially, because I think it would have been the very easy decision to say, everyday math does well for us. You can look at our test scores, and yeah, we may not be at the very top of the state, but we're not doing too poorly. And so I think, again, my commendation to the committee for really, I think, getting past the emotional aspect and really, we hear it all the time, using data to drive the decision. And I think it was very obvious that you did that. So on behalf of the board, I really commend the work that you did and appreciate the recommendation that you're coming forward with tonight.
The curriculum is one of the committee I requested when I joined the board. I think this is one of the most important decisions this board will make in the future. One of the questions I have, I guess, first of all, I want to thank you for all your hard work and not making the easy decision, understanding the fact that we've got to change to grow. And I want to thank you in advance for the much more difficult task in the next year or two of implementing this curriculum into the everyday activities that you'll take. A couple questions that each of you can take in the math and then the science. we hear a lot about the tools. Can you talk about what some of these other tools are besides the textbooks and how they'll be able to help our students and then help our parents partner with you in gaining that additional knowledge, for implementing this curriculum to the students? So maybe start with the math folks first, some of these additional tools, and then the science, whatever.
Specifically at the high school level, and I think, Tom, this is probably what you saw that is very different from previous years. In the last adoption, we had help online support. There was a few tests or quizzes or interactive, take a quiz online, see what your score was. But after that, that was about it. And at the time, that was a really good thing. At this point, curriculum has went so far as to have even the authors, for some, give small little mini lessons. And so if I'm a kid who's gone from school that day, let's say, or if I just, there's something I need extra help on, I can go online. I can view one of the small mini lessons of the things that we're working with for that day, and teachers can link, or a student can just go pursue. At that point, you can have certain examples, and then you answer a question that's based on those examples. And if you get it right or wrong, it leads you to something that uniquely fits how the question was answered. So if it's a multiple choice, okay, so this is how you answered it, you must be having a problem with calculating slope in this manner, etc. That is in addition to other online, little quizzes or little tests to help prepare a student at home. A teacher also is, you've got everything at your fingertips, and so while it might seem the teachers would be hesitant to use that, everybody in the math department is excited that we're going to be able to use our smartboards a little bit more effectively with this curriculum. I guess those are the top two things that I can think of. Very much student-centered, I think, first, and then just the ability for teachers to work with it effectively. Does that answer your question okay?
And one of some of the tools, a lot of times my children have come home and said, I don't understand it, Dad, can you help me? What are some of the tools that parents, are these tools usable for parents also?
Oh, absolutely. So it would be the equivalent of you'd know what lesson they're on. And so if you would like to, like if I just don't get it, and it works best in your home if you sit with your child and go through the work, you can, instead of maybe having to page through the book or read it on your own, you can quickly view a little mini lesson, or you could even check out what the big objectives are for that lesson. You could view a couple of the examples so that you're able to help your child. To me, that is incredible, I think, to have. So basically, it's like you've got a little teacher right on the screen who I think it's not very corny. It's actually pretty decent. So is that
Yep.
pretty decent?
And in the science area? Maybe some of the tools?
In the science area, one of the big things we were looking for in tools, because science is so vocabulary heavy and also math heavy, is we were very concerned with our lower ability reading groups, our ELL students especially. So we, when we looked at books, we wouldn't even consider one if the students couldn't go to the text and have portions read to them. And that was a tool we absolutely needed to have online for kids to be able to go and do. That will depend a little bit. Some of them you can actually highlight the part you want and it will read that. Some of them it will just read paragraphs, but it will read the whole thing. That was a very important tool that we felt had to be on there. Beyond that, every vendor that we had has their own online presentations. Some, like Janine mentioned, where it's somebody actually doing live action teaching. A lot more of them are animations. Now, I will say all of those are only going to be as useful as the teachers are able to make them, which is why, as Jeff has mentioned, we're really counting on the vendors to be coming back and teaching us better how to make use of these. When the vendors came back the second time, the first time they just presented and they showed us all the bells and whistles, we had a very specific set of questions. And a few of the vendors disappeared from our radar because they didn't answer those specifically. And that's kind of what we said. We said, show us how as teachers we can go and put something on the web for our students to be able to use. I want to be able to put a lesson on there. I want to be able to put it on not just a review sheet where here's the sheet, here's the answers, but where it will take them through step by step and show us how to do that. And luckily, we were able to bring in some of our members of the department who maybe would be more hesitant to use that, and they had to show them how to do it, and we figure if they can do it, then, my gosh, anybody can do it. So those are the tools we were really after. Very much related to vocabulary and reading, and very much related to the math tools, which are the two areas that we consider to be the most difficult things in science. Does that answer what you're after?
And then I'm asking this for all the sore shoulders throughout the district for kids. Are these kids going to be carrying their textbooks back and forth all the time? Or will there be like a CD-ROM that they'll be able to take home, like for math?
For science, I'll go with elementary science. One of the nice things is each of the books are separate, physical, earth, and life. So they're smaller books instead of the giant. That is also online, the book, and they will actually have a student account that they log into online at home, and it's National Geographic Connect. We want our own password. They have the little one we can go in. Poor National Geographic today, that wasn't good enough for us. We really wanted to get in there, but we weren't able to. But the same thing, I think when we talk about FOSS, the thing I'm the most excited about is all of you have probably experienced going on vacation and they have no homework in science at the elementary level because you can't reproduce FOSS at home. This will have the experiments in their textbook or online, their household items that you can use, nothing that's dangerous. They can actually do the inquiry at home. They can be on. They can read about what's going on. They have vocabulary. Parents say, "How do I help them study for a test?" Well, it's their notes. Well, if you have a child that's not a good note taker, well, that's not real easy to do either. And so we found that we were doing so much of the work, or just taking kids, especially when they're on those 1 week to 10-day vacations, and saying they're exempt from that activity. Well, you can't do that with state standards anymore. And so we have something there, hands-on, that they can do at home. And so that's my excitement. I think the technology, National Geographic heard about our smart boards, came today to say we are trying to make everything smart board friendly, not just computer friendly. And they're already right now, because they know our district's completely smart boards in the classroom at elementary.
And then if I could have one more question on a personal note, elementary math. Are we doing away with the lattice method of multiplication?
Yes, we are
Thank
doing away with the lattice method. Although math expressions, similar to how everyday math is, it teaches different ways to solve a problem, different algorithms, and so we will still be doing that. But the lattice, the middle school has also asked us that is.
Thank you.
I want to also thank you for your hard work. I know this is a huge undertaking over these last 2 years, and your commitment to your subject area and to actually be working together, I think really says a lot about the process. These aren't two separate curriculums. They overlap, and bringing those both together really lays such a strong foundation for our children to be able to make those linkages. So for that, I'm really excited. And also the fact that you are committed to making sure that it isn't a subject area for most students, that you've really tried to go for all students. So there are those opportunities, I'm hearing, for both those students that might be struggling as well as those students that may have already mastered that particular content that you're teaching. So for both of those two reasons, I just really commend you for your work, and I'm very excited to see how these roll out, and I'm very happy to see the staff development components built in along the life of the adoption. I think it's going to be very strong, and we're looking forward to seeing it play out in your classrooms. Thank you.
Go ahead.
This one is directed toward Janine. You lost? Darn. That's good. Back a number of years ago, I was on curriculum with you, Janine, and we were going through math. And for whatever the curriculum is, we had it all divided into these different areas. And it wasn't so much that a kid wasn't getting it as much as it was the different levels of learning that kids were in. And we were plugging them into some certain areas, and we had some names for these areas. And then came to find out that we had juniors and seniors that had nowhere to go unless they went to advanced math programs. Now, I understand this is a whole new curriculum, and you kind of referred to that it's going to be helping kids along, but how are our classes going to line up so that we don't run into that again, where we've got a junior that doesn't have anywhere to go except advanced calculus, and they're going to fail immediately? I think you know what I'm talking about. We've had long discussions about that.
I do. After we had those meetings, I looked into some MinSCU results with Dr. O at the time, and we found a way to have a bridge, which actually right now is, I think, 5 sections strong for seniors to have math their senior year, so that they're going into college actually doing math every day. And for them, it's fantastic. It's taking a semester's worth of college algebra, spreading it out over a full year, and it's making it through a college level textbook. So there's a lot on here's how you read it, here's how you can go through it. It looks a lot different. And I had alluded to that with the marrying the needs of the high school versus college. Also, specifically leading up through that, so we were able to tier our class levels slightly, because even though our district has been having algebra in 8th grade for many years, as long as I've been here, we still had some students that were kind of caught, they were just in a rut after they were there. They just couldn't get much further in math. The textbook series that we're able to go with for this foundations level or this essentials level type student is written at a reading level that's 2 years younger. So it's 2 grade levels below. So it's a lot more user friendly. It has a different layout for typically a different type of kid. You're approaching it in a different way, and I really think that is going to be a strong lead into basically that class, into the pre-college algebra class. So I guess we have been meeting that in our district because we really needed to. And there was a strong outcry, I think, from parents with why are my kids going into remedial high school math classes into college? And so there was that filter already in there. And then now, through this process, we've really been able to articulate so that it can strengthen and give some structure to where those students are at.
Great, wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I thought you asked about the baseball.
I was kind of wondering, but I didn't want to throw you off.
One question I have is Mr. Miners, you talked about the linkage and the connectivity between elementary science and secondary science. I'd like to know a little bit more about the everyday math, which sounded like a more integrated math program, versus how that flows and connects with our secondary model as well, because I don't know if it's always been a really smooth transition, and how will this help?
This transition from 5th grade to 6th grade is going to be much smoother for our students. For one reason, Math Expressions has a textbook, and so they're going to be able to, students, especially in the upper elementary, are going to have experience using a textbook, which that'll be a big thing. In addition to that, there's also a strong number sense component and the algebraic expressions as well, so using algebra and math. And I think those 2 things will help the transition to the middle school.
I think just on that too, one of the conversations we had with our math committee, most particularly our elementary, is that everyday math is a spiral bound. So you hit a concept and then you go on and you hit a concept. If you've all had kids in elementary, you know how it works. Our conversation centered a little bit on spiral versus mastery. At what point are things mastered so that kids truly understand math before they move on? And when we looked at Math Expressions, there was more of a mastery foundation built into Math Expressions that everyday math did not have. So it was the recommendation coming forward here is a philosophical change that we need to have more mastery built into our elementary mathematics. It still has spiral components to it, but it articulates more that these skills should be secure by certain levels of a student's education before they move on. And I think that was something to our middle school staff when they looked at Math Expressions, I think was quite excited about, in addition to the lack of focus on lattice multiplication.
And then I know this went through the broader curriculum review committee with community members on it, wondering what some of their feedback was, or do you have any sense, members of the committee or Mr. Holmberg, of how they viewed both of these curriculums, especially given our focus on STEM that we just looked at?
At Curriculum Advisory, we have a real unique opportunity. We have one of our parent reps is a college math professor. We have a couple other community members that have a base and a passion in math and tutoring mathematics. The questions that came across were very similar to the ones you had tonight. I think there's certainly some optimism moving forward with math expressions, and of course, members of the Curriculum Advisory, I would ask if you'd want to share or just echo that thought or totally dispute that. But I gathered the sense that there was some optimism moving toward math expressions away from
I mean, I think the community members / parents on the committee, I don't know that any of them were in the detailed presentations, but certainly as the information was shared with them, I think they echoed some of what Rich's comments were. And as a parent, how will this help me help my student when he or she, not only if they're struggling, but also just test prep and the night before or the days leading up. And I think those were the types of things that they were asking. And I thought the committee members felt very comfortable that all those different aspects were addressed.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with Rich. I'm glad to get rid of lattice. And I appreciate Mrs. Comstock, you touching on the RTI component, Mr. Miners, you talking about the science concepts. I think those are both very critical pieces of our curriculum for the students that do struggle, to help them get that understanding and that foundation. So I appreciate you guys highlighting those aspects of the new curriculum as well. Any other questions? This is I can't recall, did we take a motion and a second on this yet?
I don't think we did that, no.
So I'll take a motion to approve the new math and science curriculum proposals.
So moved.
By Rich, second.
Second.
By Tom. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you all very much for your hard work and support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Rickenberg, you get to stay
Hello,
out.
I do. I have a request for a resolution approval for a grant. It's a potential to have a Minnesota Green Corps staff person come and work within our school district to help us with composting, recycling, and waste reduction. So I can answer questions you guys might have on it. It's contingent upon a grant that was just submitted last Thursday. I found out about it about a week ago. And part of the grant, you had to have a board resolution for it.
Okay. Well, why don't we take the motion first, and then we can have a discussion. Do we have a motion to, for a resolution to appoint a Minnesota Green Corps member pending and contingent upon a grant?
I'll move.
By Todd, second. By Stacy. Any questions or discussion? Yes,
I have one question. You talk about composting. Where? I mean, is it on property?
We are in the very formative stages of a partnership with the Minnewacan Sioux.
Okay.
They're looking at building a site at their site.
Okay.
And so Jim Delwo and I have had initial discussions with staff there as well as DSI to start composting next year and moving away from the food waste, which would be a huge benefit because we would be able to take the food waste, the milk cartons, paper towels, everything, about 80% of our waste.
Oh.
So this is perfect timing for us as we look to start shifting in that direction. The Minnesota Green Corps, as governed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, has four groupings in which they send staff out to organizations to assist. And one of them is organic collection and waste reduction. So it was perfect.
So how does this fit in with the program that we have going with Dig Sanitation today and taking the consumable and giving it back to agriculture? It sounds like a shift in that.
A little bit. It is. It's not live agriculture that we'd be giving it to this time. With the compost instead would go towards plants or different things. and again, it's very formative discussions with the Minnewacan and Sioux. They would have opportunities for community members to come and purchase their compost as created by them and us. They approached us a couple of months ago as to be their initial partner for this, and are continuing to look at funding because they have a very aggressive timeline of starting construction July 1 and having it open by the end of August, ready for us.
And so we, for the composting over the live agriculture?
Yep. Yes, we would bring our materials over to the Minnewacan and Sioux, and they would turn it into compost that could be added to DNR, or excuse me, the Department of Transportation uses compost a lot on the sides of the road after they've done construction to help grass grow and prevent erosion. Farmers, fields, different things like that would use the compost.
And how do we benefit? How do we benefit from that? Because don't we get a benefit from giving the consumable waste to the
We do. It would be an even greater cost reduction of our waste by having to transport it a much shorter distance. Because we do pay right now for the hog farmer to come down because of the price of gas. It would be a much shorter distance. The potentials within the school. Right now, our high school is doing the greatest amount of recycling at about 54% is what they average. So that means we're throwing away 46% of our trash. For all the stuff that we throw away, we pay a $47 per ton tipping fee in addition to 27% tax. So we throw away a lot. I'm returning on May 23rd with Dave from Dick Sanitation to give you an overview and the highlights of this past year. So I don't have all the final figures, but we pay a lot of money for our garbage. And this would provide the opportunity to have a huge impact on the cost of that by being able to compost and recycle up to 80% of our waste would be very significant.
Where would we stand on those contracts with those people, with Dix? Would those need to be renegotiated or touched on?
That's why we're in the beginning stages with that. No, because when we first created the contract with DSI, it was open, and knowing that we had the food composting, and we're looking to do the food waste, and we're looking to do composting. When we first started the partnership with the food waste, we wanted to do composting because it's much more cost effective and feasible. It takes much more than just the food waste. But at that time, we could not find a garbage hauler that would devote a truck, basically, because you have to have a truck that's clean of waste. Well, this year, DSI has started working with Carleton College and Farmington schools, and so they have it up and running. They approached us at the beginning of the year asking if we wanted to transition to that. I said, now let them try it out first, and we'll come in second year. And so the kinks are worked out and working towards that.
So the transportation or hauling the garbage you just contract could be with Dix or whatever. So we wouldn't be in charge of moving anything. That'll all be contracted out. Okay.
Yep. So, and it would just be a little reshuffling of dumpsters outside of school. And Hennepin County does this for their schools. They have a subsidy cost. Instead of paying the $47 per ton that we currently pay and most school districts pay, Hennepin County schools that do recycling and composting pay 15%, or excuse me, pay 15%, and then you don't have to pay the tax as well. So that's a pretty significant thing. In my outreach and work with schools in Edina, outside of their schools, instead of having big dumpsters for garbage, they have one dumpster for recycling, one dumpster for compost, and one 90-gallon, like we have in our garage, for the waste for the building. And that's what we're envisioning we would have as well. So the Green Corps member would help us to help educate and train the kids and the staff, because it would be a change of thinking, and then as well as help with the structural aspects of things.
Any other questions?
Yes. I know you've been working with the Minnewacan and Sioux on this project, and that this is one of their long-term goals, is to have a composting project. How close are you to making a commitment with them?
We'll know after tomorrow if they have funding.
Okay.
So they go to a vote tomorrow, and they'll call us, they said, right away.
All right.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on a resolution that would be contingent upon a grant from the Minnesota PCA. If there are no other questions or discussion, All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Now
Thank
just
you.
gotta keep your fingers crossed that we get the grant.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have, sorry, I'm off pages here. We have a request to participate in Lakefront Days and Dan Patch Days. Typically, what we've done in the past is volunteered time to sell tickets and be present at Dan Patch Days on that Saturday with the big event and the fireworks. And then for Lakefront Days, we've been asked to participate in the parade as well as volunteer after the parade. What I'd like to do is ask the board, no action right now, but we have the dates for Dan Patch Days would be Saturday, June 25th, Lakefront Days on Saturday, August 6th. Please contact Martha Hoover, and I think we'll get her contact information out to you if you can make the 25th. And Christy for Lakefront Days, I think, is our main contact. I encourage all board members to participate in one or both of those of events. They're great ways for us to engage our community and highlight the good things that are going on in our schools. Next is school board workshops. We put together a quick outline of, or I'm sorry, just the school board meeting schedule and agenda, along with some placeholders for some workshop study dates with the topics to be determined. Actually, I should have a motion for this. Do I have a motion to approve the school board meeting schedule as presented for the 2011-2012 school year?
I'll make a motion.
By Lee, second.
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions or discussion? Did you? Yes.
I would just say we've had multiple study sessions since our new board has come online with us, and you don't see as many as we move forward. Although we do have the opportunity sometimes to have study sessions that we add in, and we try to give you as much warning as we can to make sure it works for you. But these are the study sessions going forward beginning July 1st as we move forward. So we hope these dates will work.
So as Sue Ann said, we'll add them or recommend them as needed, but certainly we want to put at least some placeholders out there for us to commit to study some of the issues in front of us on an in-depth basis. So we have a motion and a second. If there are no other questions or comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. First reading of policies 428 and 524. Dr. Brewer.
Yes. Policy 428 should read employee use of social media. It's a new policy. Christy Mussman is going to speak to it. It's been something she's been spearheading as we have moved into the era of social media in our schools.
Good evening. Yes, as Dr. Gruber mentioned, this is a new policy, and we started looking at researching this a few months ago because, as many of you know, we are using Facebook and Twitter to elevate our district communications. We know that some teachers are using blogs, YouTube. It's already going on, and so we really need to have a policy in place to guide us and direct us with some rules as we go forward. So the way this started out was I started taking a look at school districts that already have a social media policy in place. There aren't very many of them. The three leaders, I would call them, with this sort of policy include Minnetonka, Edina, and Rosemount, Apple Valley, Egan, along with many, many more districts who are currently researching and hoping to implement a social media policy themselves in the very near future. But those are the three districts that I thought were the leaders in this area. I brought those policies to the Technology Committee, and I, along with the Technology Committee, dissected each one of those and took the pieces that we thought fit our district the best and what we wanted to implement, hopefully, with your approval. So some of the highlights of this, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look through it, but what it's saying in essence is that we're embracing social media and recognize that it can be a useful tool in the classroom and for district communications, so long as it is used for those purposes and not used for personal use on district time using district equipment. So we wanted a policy in place to encourage the use of social media, but also to protect staff and students. We are asking that a parental consent is used for teachers who would like to use this tool in their classroom. The technology committee also felt it was important that if students are going to be using this, that they are taught some acceptable use for social media and set some ground rules for using it. So I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, but we did put a student code of ethics that's attached to 524. So we kept that part separate as a student portion, but 428 does deal with just employee use of social media. And one thing, we did bring this through to the policy committee a couple times, of course, but also to the administrative team. And one thing that came out in every group is the recognition that this is one of those policies that's just going to evolve over time, since technology is constantly changing and there's so many hundreds of different social media platforms out there. So this is our kind of our first crack at it, and we'll have to see how it works and promote it to teachers, and probably, if you choose to accept it, annually review it to make sure it's still fitting the needs. Are there any questions about it? I don't know if you want me to walk you through it a little bit, or if you've had a chance.
I guess I have a quick question. What about monitoring or assuring, particularly on the public online social media, that it's being used appropriately? I think that's maybe the biggest fear, is what's going on Twitter or what's being posted on Facebook, and keeping up with those uses on the public sphere more than say the Moodles or the authenticated ones. Has that been talked about much?
Yeah, we thought we would start with, throughout the policy, there's talk of district-sponsored social media sites, and need to work with technology on what exactly those are going to be. We've talked about, right now, the ones that are blocked, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are blocked. We talked about those kind of being the three biggies that we could unblock and see how those go. Obviously, Moodle's already in use, and that one has controls, but that's something that we would need to work with technology to see which ones we're going to unblock, and then promote those ones to staff accordingly.
I guess I'm concerned more about the usage of them once they're unblocked, and how do we ensure that they're not being used for the wrong purposes?
Well, and I think that's going to be a little bit of a trial and error. Throughout this policy, too, we're saying, if a teacher, for example, wanted to use, say, Facebook, they would need to let their principal know that they're trying it out, and it would be up to the teacher to monitor that, and also for the parent and the student to look through that student code of ethics. And I think there's about 12 different steps that they have to agree to follow to prevent things like cyberbullying and those sorts of things. And cyberbullying is also covered in this bullying policy as well. But it's one of those things that I think we're going to have to see how it goes and monitor it.
And is that something our new technology, sorry to dominate the conversation, our new technology coordinator could be looking at that, be a member of the Facebook group or a member of the Twitter account in such a way that we've got some oversight?
I would love to work with Mr. Malazzo on that. Yeah.
The answer would be yes.
You hear so many stories in the news about the misuse of these social media. I want to make sure that we've looked at that aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Just to be devil's advocate, because I agree we need to be careful, but obviously it's the bad things that always get the news coverage. And, I'm assuming that we wouldn't be the first district that would be looking to utilize these forms of social media to enhance the student learning experience. I mean, that's, I believe, at the core of the whole point of doing this. And I think that the challenge is that when we write a policy, you can't anticipate what's going to happen, right? So unfortunately, a lot of these policies become somewhat reactionary in nature, that something occurs that, oops, the unintended effect, and now we got to draft the policy or modify the policy to say, okay, this shouldn't happen any further. So I think what you're really trying to say is, as we go forward, here's the span of what we do know, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I'm a personal big believer that people actually behave the way that you set the expectations, and if you expect them to perform at this level, they'll do that. But if you raise the bar and say, we expect you to be here, most people will do what we want them to. So I applaud you guys coming forward and saying, here's what we're trying to do proactively.
Yes.
And I would add to that, Mike, that we really tried to embed the word privilege in here, that it's a student privilege to be, and a teacher privilege to be able to use this social media within a classroom. We know that we're kind of behind the 8 ball. We already have Moodle being used in our online hybrid classes. We have a couple of teachers experimenting with what would that look like and feel like to have students use their handheld phones to participate in the class. So we would like to have something out there that helps guide our staff as we move forward. As we did that, we realized that we also had to also alter our student use of technology because they overlap with each other. And that code of ethics that Christy's referring to, we ended up putting behind our existing student use of technology because we wanted to embed it. We want that social media piece to be part of our technology use permit of our students, so that parents are having a say in it. They know that something's happening in that classroom that might look different to start with, but that they can be involved as well. So there'll be multiple checks along the way. And I do believe we'll bring it back on an annual basis as we learn.
Just a point of, we're discussing 524 also at this point? Okay. I noticed that in 428 you defined what social media is, but on 524 you did not define what social media is. And maybe I could ask that we put that definition in there.
Absolutely. Good catch.
Any other reactions to policy?
And policy 524 is our existing policy. You can see the underlined words where we've added "and social media." Are there anything else you want to say on that?
No, the goal would be to have this prepared so that when principals are putting together their student handbooks for summer, we've included social media and also brought to parent and student attention the addition to 524, should you approve it next board meeting.
Okay. Well, this is a first reading, and it'll come back at our next meeting. We have a second and final reading for Policy 413, harassment and violence.
And this policy is one that Matt Mons has spearheaded, so I'll hand the microphone over to him to discuss harassment and employees.
I'm going to fumble with this one then, because the reason being that we had gotten some input from our meet and confer group, and then we did not bring this back to the policy group at our last meeting. And so actually, if it would be possible, I think that it would probably be prudent to remove this, bring it back to the policy group to make sure that we've addressed those concerns, and then bring it forward for a second reading at our next board meeting.
Is there any objection?
No. Does that take a motion or something?
I'm just going to do it without objection. Then we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, that's. We will be going into closed session to talk about negotiation strategy, but before we do that, I'd like to go through administrative reports. Superintendent.
Sure. I will keep mine brief tonight. As many of you, or all of you may know, last week was Teacher Appreciation Week. And as I sat here tonight, I was fed over and over again by those wonderful teachers coming forward to share what's happening and their passion for their teaching. And you can see the quality of the teachers that we have in this district, and for that we celebrate every day. It's also bittersweet because also on tonight's agenda you saw that we are non-renewing fabulous non-tenured teachers. And in addition to that, we have put teachers on unrequested leaves of absence because we don't have places for them. It is my sincerest hope that we'll be able to bring back many of those people in the fall. And in the meantime, I've been in the schools, and I can tell you that our teachers are operating at that highest caliber, that they're really working hard, they're collaborative, as you saw tonight, they're looking at new initiatives with the same gusto that they always have. And they know that hard times may be ahead, but that we will continue to do really excellent work with our students. And that commitment is written all over everything you saw tonight. So I'm excited about what's happening, but also very disappointed that we have to make these cuts. And we're not doing this because we just decided to make cuts. We're doing it because we know that educational funding is at risk, and that we need to be financially good stewards of the money that our community has given to us for our schools, and we're going to do that and be financially stable. But we also know that means, because over 80% of our budget is all teachers and our staff members, that's where we need to cut. And so it is bittersweet, but there is a sense of positivity in the air, in that we will continue to do good work. So I'll just end with that.
Thank you. Any other administrative reports?
I have
Yes,
a
ma'am.
report. And Julie and I were able to discuss with the Finance Committee today the work that we've been doing to explore the options that the district has in our future health insurance for our employees. And as we've been going through that, we see an opportunity that we'd like to discuss with the rest of the board. So it's our recommendation that we meet in 2 weeks on May 23rd and have a 5 o'clock finance meeting with the entire board that everyone can be invited to, where we will have a presentation to go over what some of these options might be for us for pursuing our insurance for the future. And additionally, we are on a tight timeline with this, so we would further recommend that we hold a special session on May 31st, a time to be established, but where we could perhaps take action on the decision that we make regarding our insurance for the future.
As Matt said, this was an item brought to Finance Committee just this evening. You've been working on it for a couple of weeks. And we do have, if we're going to make a decision, we do have some tight timelines in order to make a July 1st transition if we decide to do so. Is there any conflicts with doing a study session prior to the board meeting on the 23rd?
At 5 o'clock.
At 5 o'clock.
Is that quick enough?
Yes.
Okay.
We talked about the timing and the timeline, and if we can get the special meeting on the 31st,
Yep.
Just a Tuesday.
What?
A Tuesday.
A Tuesday,
Yeah,
yeah, be the day following Memorial Day.
I have a conflict with the 31st.
Do you have a conflict with the 31st? Okay.
I do too, but it could be moved.
I'm sorry, what?
I have a conflict currently, but
But the 31st?
31st, the 30th would work.
That's Memorial Day.
Oh, you're right.
We're going to be in the Dell.
Yeah, I'll be in the Dell.
Matt, is the intent also for the study session on the 23rd to include the insurance committee?
Yes.
So it wouldn't just be the
That-
board. Actually, I think, make sure that we're all hearing the information.
And we're going to reach out in collaboration with Deb Johnson to make sure that the people who need to be in that room will be in that room.
Is there another date that week?
Is there a reason we need to wait a week to have this special meeting?
Not necessarily, except it was simply in an effort to make sure that as many board members as possible could participate. And so that's why we selected a date where we already had a scheduled meeting.
I think
No, I'm not talking about the 23rd.
Oh,
I'm
on the
talking about
31st?
I think the thought, Lee, was to have a first reading of the proposal.
On the 23rd.
On the 23rd, and then have a second reading at such time that any questions that come out of the study session could be addressed before we take a final vote.
And the reason for not waiting till the next board meeting is that school ends, and the folks affected by this would only have a day or two of actual being in the building. So we're trying to be cognizant of their needs.
Right.
Because they're really, in the end, if we do go forward, the ones that are impacted in terms of administrative. I mean, I think what we will hear, not to steal the thunder, is the actual activities that the employees experience won't change at all really for all intents and purposes, but there still is the administrative aspect that lots of, Deb was in our finance committee meeting and very, candid about, the need to make sure that all the employees are really comfortable that truly in the end this won't have a impact on them. So the more time we have to do that, I think, is just being recommended by Matt and Julie and Dr. Gruber, the better. So that's why I think they're proposing the special session to take action on that.
I do.
And I'm a little confused, because if we're going to have this special, or the workshop on the 23rd and a first reading on the 23rd, and then we're expecting to have a second reading and vote on it on the 31st, is that enough time, or are the affected staff going to hear about this before the workshop? That's not much time with Memorial Day in the middle of it.
We can do some education there too. We can work on that. We're going to do the very best that we can to get the word out if we are indeed going to look at making a change after we hear the presentation. So we can be as proactive as we can try to be, but.
I mean, I feel like I'm hearing two different things here. You want more time. We kind of have 4 days.
In between them.
In between. Right. And I question, is that enough time for those impacted to grasp the meaning of what we're doing, if there is fear that there's going to be some major change?
And the problem is that ideally we'd have significantly more time to be having this discussion. This was a unique year in that the cooperative that we currently are a member of, who we go through for our insurance, they went out for bid this year, and because of that process, we were given our rates at an extremely late date. And so it's put us in the position now where, in order to make comparisons, we really need to do that on a tight time frame. And so we wish that we would, of course, have significantly more time to get communication out, but it's not feasible. So as much time as we can have.
Okay. I'm again going to question then, if we're in such a tight timeline, why wouldn't we, can I finish? Why wouldn't we have this workshop sooner so there's more time to get it out to the rest of the staff then? I'm not getting this, because we're allowing 2 weeks for the 7 of us to hear about it, plus an insurance committee, and then we're allowing 4 days for the rest of the employees that are impacted to find out about this and understand it, and it directly impacts them. It doesn't directly impact me. So I guess it's kind of a disconnect for me.
Well, and if it's possible to hold a session before that, the board members can participate in, then that's just fine.
Well, I think it was trying to get together, because it is a big group going through the study session, trying to coordinate it as much kind of lead time as we have. I don't think this was really meant to be a big open forum, because, as Mike said, the impact to employees should be negligible. What we're really talking about is who's going to provide the insurance going forward, not any change in the plan. In fact, the plans would be identical as we heard this evening.
And then I've heard you say that, and I understand that. Yeah. But to an employee, as they hear this, I'm not sure that they're going to understand that immediately. And if we can do it in 4 days, that's fine. I find it kind of...
I guess what we heard at our session earlier today is the bigger impact to the employees is when the decision is made, what do I need to do, as opposed to weighing in on the decision. And actually, Deb was very straightforward in saying it really is our decision, I guess, from the district on how we provide the benefits, if you will, to the employees. And so really it's our decision. What we're trying to do is the courtesy to the staff to say, come and listen at the same time. But really, I think the thing that Deb weighed in is saying, the more time once the decision is made that we give to the employees, the better. And so I think that's really why the recommendation was to say, how can we accelerate that so that the decision can be made sooner, so that the employees then afterwards, because that's really going to be where the questions would really come forward, that they would say, okay, what does this mean to me? So that's really the reason why the timing. And if after the 23rd, if we say, boy, we're kind of uncomfortable making this decision, we can choose to cancel the 31st, but we'd rather put it out there as the possibility right now, I think, rather than waiting to the 23rd and say, oh, by the way, can we get together next week kind of thing.
And Lee, too, just in terms
I
of
guess
having...
I'm not making myself clear here.
And just in terms of having teachers understand this, you know, it's, first of all, it's always difficult to get information out regarding insurance. You know, I mean, it's a tough concept to gain interest in, frankly. And, you know, we've had difficulty in that in the past. What we're really trying to do is make sure that we have the right people at the table. So we're trying to have a building rep from every building come. And so that's what we're going to be working with Deb on, so that we can get questions asked and answered. And hopefully then it's those individuals that can go back to their buildings and answer some of those questions for staff members. You know, I don't know how feasible it's going to be able to pull together the entire teaching staff at individual buildings and have Julie and I necessarily do presentations in that kind of a timeline. I don't think that that's what we'd be looking at. What we're looking at is just making sure that we've informed key members of our stakeholders to understand this, and it's going to, you know, need to go beyond teaching as well into our other staff groups to make sure that they're represented.
And I'm not questioning your process at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my point. I guess my point is, should we be looking at moving this process, the beginning part of this process, up earlier?
Sure.
To allow for more time, for more discussion, because in all the years I've been on the board, the insurance committee is very sensitive to what's going on, and they want to understand it. They're not always that interested in change, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm.
And this may not change any of their benefits, anything like that, but there's going to be a change. And I believe that in the past, that gets them a little bit concerned and nervous about what's going on. So for them to have more time to process that is my point. Your whole process of how you want to do this, I'm not questioning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that it should maybe have started earlier than the 23rd. I mean, today is the 9th.
Mm-hmm.
And we're waiting to start this process till the 23rd. That's 2 weeks. So I'm just asking, would it make sense to move things up on the front end of this process?
And if people can meet, I mean, the original thought that we had was next Monday. But there were concerns about availability and pulling together the group on that short time frame.
I for one can't make Monday.
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, and I think as we looked at it, we've got some principal interviews going on that week. We've got building committee scheduled. We've got a number of different conflicts where this was the one time where we traditionally kind of are able to quickly reserve time ahead of a board meeting in order to get it done. And I think that was the thought of the finance committee, was to follow that same process. Again, wholly agree, if we could pull it together sooner, it would be good, but I want to make sure that these guys have enough time to work with the consultant and pull together a presentation that makes sense for the
We'd
project.
be able to present within a week, I believe, and we'll get the people in the room from our end.
About the 18th, after the principal.
Just trying to take a look here.
And then we wouldn't have to have a special board meeting if we had it on the 18th. We would have a special board meeting on the 18th for our first, we'd reverse it. Rather than having the vote 4 days later, we do it the other way around. We would have a special board meeting on the 18th to go over the plan, and then that would be the first reading of it, and then vote on it on the 23rd.
I mean, that doesn't necessarily solve the issue in that there's still not going to be a large time frame in between that initial meeting and board action. So if that's, the goal to eliminate that, we could push back, I suppose, the second meeting from Tuesday the 31st to look at the second or the first or the second. That buys us a day or two, and then I don't know if it's possible to move up on the 23rd, from the 23rd
right.
to an earlier date.
And I think what's important here is the time it's going to take for the teachers, because the only change for the teachers is going to be they have a new ID card. That's it. So there might be some paperwork they need to fill out before they leave for the summer. So getting them more time on the front end is going to be the most critical piece of this whole change for them. Since none of their benefits are going to change, that is the only key factor in it.
Correct. Presuming we decide to change.
Presuming we decide to change.
Absolutely.
Didn't mean to delay all this.
No,
I'm
that's
just trying
fine.
to look at the best way to do it.
Unfortunately, I've got a number of conflicts next week. I could potentially do it the Wednesday after the interviews. That'd be about the only day next week I could do it.
Well, I mean, I guess the other option potentially could be, would the board be comfortable of having information shared with the insurance committee without us there, and then we hear it later on? I think it's going to be the same information.
Yeah.
If they can pull that group together.
Yeah. I mean, based on the fact that the finance committee at least has heard the concept, and so, we're aware of what's going on, so it wouldn't be that information shared that at least we're not aware that we're contemplating. And if that might help, at least get that ball rolling. And then we could still have our meeting prior to the meeting on the 23rd to get more detail.
I mean, I, for one of the things of having the insurance committee there was to have that perspective available at the time.
And we could still ask them to come then too, so that, we could, get there.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can certainly see if we can do that. It sounded like it would work on the 23rd, and, if we couldn't pull something together beforehand, but we're certainly going to have the availability to meet before then. So as long as we can pull together a representative group of
And that might be
teachers.
something that, our negotiating committees, if those board members are available to perhaps, participate there as well, that may, because again, it's not just the certified, it's the entire staff really that are affected, so.
Yep.
I mean, there's more than one way to try to go about this, right?
So if you can find a date for the insurance committee to meet, and then let the board know, so that those members that have or have not heard the presentation or would like to have more information could attend that as well, before the 23rd at 5 o'clock.
Sounds good.
The last question is, when would we decide? And we didn't come up with a date as yet, and that was, I believe we were headed toward the 1st or the 2nd?
Or that 31st date.
Well, if you have a quorum, you're fine.
Well, I think this is a big enough decision where if we had 6, I'd be comfortable. I think if we're down to 5, Todd can't make it, I'm uncomfortable, and I'd like to find a different date. Is there another date that works, say Wednesday the 1st?
Do we need to make the decision on that tonight?
We need to be able to post the meeting.
We'll be able to post the meeting. The benefit for making the decision tonight is that it is out there then, and people are aware of it from tonight on. That's the benefit of making the decision tonight, but it's not necessary.
When is the last possible date we can make the decision?
The last possible date, if we could make the decision right around the end of the month here, that would really be the preference. We could make this decision after the first board meeting in June, but I think that in order to responsibly do this and to roll it out for our employees, that we should try to push this forward.
June 1st? Is that a viable date? Works.
That's fine.
Okay, why don't we tentatively schedule June 1st at 6 o'clock?
We do it.
What? Earlier?
I have youth activity that night.
Oh, 5 o'clock?
We do 5 or 5:30?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, later is better for me.
5:30?
5:30 work? All right.
For me, too.
So we'll have a special meeting Wednesday, June 1st at 5:30.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Right.
And that takes care of the Finance Committee report as well. Any other administrative reports? Okay. Any other board reports? Okay. Before we go into closed session, Just to remind everyone that May 19th, we have the district retirement party from 3:30 to 5:30 at Twin Oaks, and our regular board meeting on the 23rd with a new workshop starting at 5 o'clock. Is there anything else that needs to come before the board before I entertain a motion to enter closed session?
Just an FYI, on Friday morning at 7:30 at the Prior Lake City Hall, during the SCALE meeting, there's going to be a presentation on the Minnesota Student Survey. And Sue Ann is speaking, and two other superintendents in Scott County, so it's kind of going to be representative of the county. So if you're interested, want to get up early, they have coffee and donuts all for free. 7:30 City Hall.
Love to have you.
Yes.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
By Todd, second by Tom. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're going to enter into closed session. I'll hold a 5-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 9:40 on my computer.
On your
On my computer.
On your computer.
I am the official signer.
Okay.
Kids downloading things.
Okay, we're back in open session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Todd. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries session, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Right?
Yes, Todd.